Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, you'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Vanas, and welcome to Real Estate Pro Talk. This is a real estate-oriented program which will cover a variety of topics every Friday afternoon from 3 to 4 p.m. here on WOON Radio. Some of the topics we'll be talking about during our time together will be how to buy and sell a home, how to choose a real estate agent, how to choose a mortgage broker, flipping real estate, home inspections, how to buy a property with an IRA, and finally, how to develop a piece of raw land to turn it into your dream home. I've been in the real estate business coming up on 40 years now, of which I own a real estate brokerage company, a real estate school, and a land development company. All of the knowledge that we are going to try to impart on you today is based on the continuing education classes that I teach licensed real estate brokers and agents, along with my personal experience and those of our expert guests that we have today. The goal in doing this is so you can have the information in hand when you meet a seasoned real estate broker. That way you'll know exactly what they're talking about, and you'll definitely impress them because you'll have inside technical knowledge about the business. You're welcome to call us today at 401-766-1240, 401-766-1240, and ask any question on the subjects we'll be discussing. I'm pleased to have with me today, our guest is Elise Vetri. Say hello, Elise, you're on the air.
Hi, Paul. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, Elise has been, I've known Elise quite a few years now, and Elise is a top agent in the Northern Rhode Island real estate market. And tell me, Elise, let's start off with how you got in the real estate business. What are your origins?
Well, I've always been in sales and marketing. It was a decision that I had made early on because I get bored very easily. And so I have been in sales for, I think, probably right after college. And I was a road rep. I worked for L'Oreal, and then I worked for Nestle. And, it was a lot of hours on the road. So I decided, I really love sales. I love determining the outcome of my day. But I really wanted to get off the road and go inside. So that's when I started an inside sales department for 3 local manufacturers. And so it was a time when companies were very anxious to cut costs, get their reps off the road, and duplicate that process over the phone. So I literally sat in an office and called people all day long. And I worked with small businesses, retail operations all across the country. In fact, my one of the most exciting jobs I've had, and I call them jobs. It wasn't a career path, but it was still. I learned a lot. I learned about people and their businesses. And one of the most exciting jobs, it was at KG Engineering in Woonsocket on Front Street. And they were a big company, headed by 2 engineers. And they were in the motorcycle industry creating chrome products. And unfortunately, the industry changed dramatically when motorcycles were becoming out of fashion. So they invented the first mountain bike that had suspension. And if you were to Google what that transition was like, it was epic. Wow, and so, going to the trade show with the first suspension bike that's ever been made was like, you were like a rock star. So I did that for 3 different companies, established their inside sales organizations. And around the year 2000, I was really starting to get hungry for a challenge, and I wanted a career path. My last position, I was actually in technology, helping companies develop an online presence. So I began to study real estate, and I saw how the industry was migrating more and more to the internet, and I felt, wow, I got all this background, I have all this knowledge, and now I have this new experience with technology. I felt like everything I had done was a perfect match to be in real estate, so here I am 15 years later.
That's quite a transition. You go from high tech, really, and almost like an engineering type of sales to real estate. But I guess the old adage is true where a good salesperson can really sell anything if they, because it's really the same techniques, sell the benefits of the product and build a client base, right? And use that client base over and over, and then the client base grows.
Exactly.
That's great. Now, so you've been doing this for quite a while, and I know I notice your signs are everywhere. Every time I drive around North Smithfield, I always think of you because I see your signs everywhere. What are the market conditions right now, Elise? How do you see the market as far as your listings and sales are concerned?
Well, we're in very, very interesting times right now. And it's something that is fun to talk about. I don't know that we'll ever see anything like this again. As people probably know, the market, went through a bad change of events, and prices went down. But in late 2011, that's when this market did start to recover. And here we are, 8 years later, in this long-term protracted recovery. And everyone knows also that real estate is very cyclical, so we really should be seeing prices start to level out right now. Sure. If and some markets have corrected. I was talking to an agent today out of Connecticut, and Connecticut is not seeing the sales, the robust sales like we've been seeing here in Northern Rhode Island. In fact, they've slowed down, I think, about 3 years ago. So
why do you think that? Why do you think? Do they not have the industry, or do they?
I really think that's what it is, because Northern Rhode Island has been very insulated from that, because there are other markets across the country that have already corrected. I think that we've largely been insulated because the Boston market has supported our economy. I don't know if it's true or not, but I had once heard that as many as 20% of the people that live in Northern Rhode Island get their income out of Massachusetts. Really? And when you really think about that, it's a perfect equation, because they're able to get that higher income in Mass, live in Rhode Island where it's a lower cost of living. So it's a nice match. So really what's been going on is so speaking of Northern Rhode Island, we have a good economy, wages are up, and as a result of that, you've got strong consumer confidence. I really, and also too, don't forget, lower interest rates enables a person to pay more for a house, and that only translates. So let's, for instance, when the rates were down as low as 3%, and that's when the market was really, really robust. Right. So for every $10,000 that a buyer increased their purchase price, it only translated to an extra $50 in the mortgage payment. Right. And when you really look at it that way, it helps you to understand how we got to where we are. Because, as the buyer is willing to pay more, all right, the seller is getting more. So it's clear that we're in a seller's market. We've been in a seller's market, and I think we will continue to be in a seller's market. But when you have a situation where both buyers and sellers both benefit from the same market conditions, right, it makes it extremely interesting.
It does, and I notice too, just from a pricing perspective, because I have people that call me and ask, Paul, can you come over and tell us what the house is worth? We're not really ready to sell right now, but we'd like you to come over just so we have a general idea. I notice in the comparables that I use, I'm going back right now for pricing now to 2004 in a lot of circumstances.
Absolutely.
Not so much for condominiums, but for single families. Correct. All you really have to do is look at what the 2004, 2005-ish prices, not quite 2005, but like 2004 and a half, July of 2004, and look at the price then, and really it matches what it should be now. So and that's quite a thing as far as I'm concerned, because that was the biggest boom I experienced in the amount of time. I mean, I experienced the 80s boom in the real estate business, whereby in 3 to 4 years we went up, almost double in price. But I had never experienced anything like the 2003, 4, and 5 market, where it was almost 2.5 times the value in some cases, and now it's kind of leveled off back to where it was. So that would tell me that it's a pretty good market, especially if you're going to sell.
Exactly.
Now, the typical profile of the Northern Rhode Island. See, I'm an implant to Northern Rhode Island. Did you come from the?
I grew up in Northern Rhode Island. Yes.
Okay. See, I'm an implant. I came from Providence, and my only experience with Northern Rhode Island was going to the Buck Hill Boys Scout camp, back in the late '60s. But I came up here. My wife and I came up to Northern Rhode Island, to Burrillville. In the late '80s, and I'll tell you, we really wouldn't move anywhere else, because there's kind of a combination of folksiness and everybody knows everybody, so it's a village effect. But at the same time, you have the amenities of a city, and you have the amenities of in Woonsocket, and then of course the suburbs, the typical city with the suburbs around it for the single family home. So the people that grow up in the city want to go to the suburbs, and the suburbs are there for them here in Woonsocket.
Yeah.
Now, what's the typical profile of buyer that you see right now? Those buyers that are out there looking in Northern Rhode Island, are they looking primarily for single family? Are they looking for multifamily, or a combination of both, or what?
Well, it's very, very interesting. All three, actually.
Really?
So they're looking for single family homes, they're looking for multifamilies, and they're also looking for condos. Starting out with single family homes, we have an excellent, Northern Rhode Island is known for its excellent schools, and but also too, Northern Rhode Island is known for its excellent commute to Massachusetts, like I was saying earlier, or Point South if they're working in Providence or Worcester. So, we have a lot of professionals that are attracted to North Smithfield. We have an interesting presence of multifamily properties, so a lot of investors are drawn to the city. So Northern Rhode Island is really, and of course we do have new construction, condominium developments that are going up, and more and more and more. It used to be that condominiums attracted the older clientele, the older demographic, but we're starting to see a lot more younger people attracted to condos,
sure.
which you would never see before. But they're busy professionals, and they're really focused on lifestyle, so the condominium gives them that. So we do have a lot of reasons for people to come to Northern Rhode Island.
And that's 100% correct, because my son, who's 26 or so years old, he lives in a condominium in Northern Rhode Island, and maybe he's smarter than I was, but he doesn't want to mow the lawn, and he doesn't want to shovel the walkway, and he tells me it's really nice when I open my garage door and just drive to work in the wintertime. It's one of those things where you're right, the demographic has changed considerably.
Yes.
Over the past, because I know when I was coming up, when we were married, I would have never considered a condominium.
Absolutely not.
We wanted what our parents had with the backyard, to have the barbecues and do whatever recreational property, basically. So basically, there's a full spectrum of what's going on right now for sale in the market. Do you see any particular price range based on, you go on a lot of listing presentations, because I see your signs everywhere, as I mentioned. Is there any particular price range right now that's the hot price range to be in, where the house will, if it's priced right, it'll be on the market for a week or something, or what are you seeing right now?
If I were to think about that, the way that I would answer that would be, the topic for some time to come is always going to be inventory. And so you have a lot of young buyers that have been shut out of the market. So if you're in a price point where you're anywhere between 200 and 250, 250,000, you will attract that buyer, particularly Woonsocket. I mean, Woonsocket you're not going to be able to find a home in the Northern Rhode Island communities for that price point. So you'll have to come into Woonsocket for it. And so if you have a home that's priced between 200 and 250,000, your house will be in demand.
Really?
The other demographic is, like I mentioned earlier, the professional, the growing family. They want the quality schools, And so if you can get them a 3, preferably a 4-bedroom house, that's going to be 2,500 square feet. That is going to be, and particularly if it's right under that $500,000 mark, you will be also in great demand. So those are the two segments that I see that there's not enough inventory for those families.
So conversely, if you're a seller that has that 250 house, you're sitting on a pretty hot commodity.
You are.
Yeah,
you are.
And if of course, if you're thinking of selling, now is probably the time to do that. And depending on where you're going in life, but if you want to cash in and move on, now is probably the time to do it.
They've always said that consumers don't necessarily time the market. However, I have seen and met with a considerable number of people that are doing just that.
Really?
They recognize that this is a historic time period, like you said earlier. We haven't seen something like this since 2006. And so we have sellers that are timing the market. I've got a couple, they're not retiring until next April, but they've asked me to list their property now so they can take advantage of the prices.
Smart.
And so it's a little complex because we have to find them a place to live until they retire if it does sell quickly. But they're going to get what they paid for it in 2006.
Wow, that's great. Well, we're talking to Elise Vetri today, and Elise is a real estate broker in Northern Rhode Island, and we're going to take a short commercial break, and we'll continue our conversation with Elise further.
Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, you'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144.
Okay, we're back with Elise Vetri. Had a small technical problem here, which is my error once again. I'm new to the board here, and it's operator error, and I have to learn the ropes. Elise, this is like taking the training wheels, taking the training wheels off of the bicycle.
You're doing great.
But
we're realtors. We're not radio.
I heard Dave Richards the other day on the radio talking to someone who called in. I think it was yesterday morning, and he said the worst thing you could hear in radio is silence because it does something to you. It sends a shiver up and down your spine, and I can understand that because in any event, well, you've built a client base, right? You have quite a few people calling you, and how do you maintain being a popular broker? And I mean, you're busy every day. You're showing houses, you're listing houses, you're going to inspections, you're going to closings, and of course you have to build up that client base. How do you maintain your client base?
I am very, very fortunate, Paul, that at this juncture in my career that about 30% of my business does come from past clients. And it takes a long time to get to that point. So like I said, I'm very grateful for that. So these will be people who have bought a house with me in the past, that first-time buyer who has decided it's time to move up to that larger home. I met with a couple yesterday, and we were in their kitchen and talking about that move to that bigger and more expensive home for their growing family. And, they recall when they bought the house from us 4 years ago, and they said, you know what, we don't want to go with anyone else. And so that's the greatest compliment you could ever receive. Then, of course, referrals. And so, again, about 30% of the business does come from these past clients and from others who are referring me out to new people.
I'm sure. Now, I would think, you have to be in constant contact with these folks, either email or phone calls or mailings or all kinds of different methods? What are the type of methods that you use to
One of my
keep your
favorite
clients?
things, well, yes, absolutely. We want to make sure that they remember us just as much as I remember them. And so there are multiple channels. I like to remember birthdays, just to let them know that I think, the worst part of my job is the closing day, because I, worked with these people that I really, really like and enjoy being with. And then, of course, they need to move on with their lives. And, so, you don't get to see them or talk to them as much. So I really, really try to stay in touch with them on Facebook. That's been a really great tool. I'll get to see the pictures of the new babies when they come along, and life events. But, I do call my clients. I do check in with them. But I also, too, my goal is to educate. And so I do a newsletter. I do one every year.
Very good.
And I talk about market conditions and things like we're talking about today. Maybe throw in there what's going on with their local market and prices in their area, and I send that out to them. So that's a great way to keep in touch, because I'm educating them at the same time. So it's multiple channels that I use.
So they're relying on you for certain information that they normally wouldn't get. But I love the fact that you said you're using social media. My son tells me that no one under 30 uses Facebook. I have to go over to Instagram, and I haven't played around with that yet. I don't know if you have.
I'm taking a class next week on Instagram.
Cool.
Yes, cool. I have to have the young people teach me how to do that.
Right. Yeah, but Facebook really is a huge vehicle to market things now. Because I know when it first started, when they went public, everyone was saying, "Well, how are they going to make any money? With the buying and selling of their stocks, how are they going to be profitable?" And I think they've kind of overcome that. Now, do you get many of your clients who will see something on Facebook and then email you or call you, or is it by chance you have to basically, bump into them and then say, "Oh, by the way, Elise, we want to sell"? Are they that aggressive where they see the advertising and they actually call you?
Yes. There are, where that business will come from will be friends of friends of friends.
Okay.
And so, hey, Elise, thank you so much for being that person that helped me sell our home. I have a couple right now. They're on the road for the next 10 years. They sold their dream home that they had built 20 years ago, and they exchanged that dream home for an RV. And so the post a few weeks ago was, "Hey, Elise, thank you so much for helping make our dream come true. We don't regret that decision at all. And thank you for helping us sell our home." And and then there'll be a thread, and through that, I have gotten friends of that friend reach out to me through Facebook and say, "You know what? I'm thinking about selling my home next year. Can you come over and give me some ideas, give me some advice?" So it definitely does work. Yes.
A lot different from when I was beating the pavement. Years ago we used to have a thing called 6 times equals 62% retention. You have to. Someone has to see your face or your name 6 times to remember you 62% of the time. And that's like half, and that's not a lot. So you have to, constantly stay in front of people every day, just like the television ads on TV. They figure if they play enough ads, you'll remember, to go to the market and buy Skippy peanut butter instead of another peanut butter, and so on and so forth. So I think that's important, and we've gravitated to these more advanced means where years ago, all we had to do was just put a sign on the lawn or an ad in the paper, and you just sit back and wait. But now it's more aggressive with your advertising. Tell me, so based on your experience, Elise, what are the, there's ups and downs and everything. What are the pitfalls that, people made in their business, in listing their houses with you, or most sellers will make initially when they put their house on the market? Can you just name a couple of things so maybe our listeners can understand that these are important things not to do? Absolutely.
So we're just talking about Facebook, we're talking about friends, and, it's really great to have a level of comfort with your agent. If you don't like that person, then it doesn't matter how skilled they are. It's not going to work. But if I think about what common mistakes that consumers will make when they're thinking about selling and they're interviewing their agents. One thing I've noticed is, I've come across it recently, where you really should be asking this person, what is your business model? Are you a listing agent or are you a buyer's agent? And there is a vast difference between the two. Myself, as being, I will work with buyers. I do absolutely work with buyers, but what I do primarily every day is I list properties for sale. And when you list properties for sale, you have a different skill set than a buyer's agent. You're specializing.
Sure.
Pricing a home is literally predicting with a certain level of accuracy what someone is going to pay for your home in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
So that takes a certain skill set. Just like you said, you're using a skill where you've learned that if you go back to 2004, you can draw some parallels between what's happened then and now, and that can help you to accurately derive a sales price. Not only just the price, but also too, what advice can an agent give? What do you have a marketing budget? It could be a question, because it takes some money to sell a house. It doesn't come free. And so there are some things that a consumer should be asking their agent. They should be asking a lot of questions, and that would be that I see the biggest mistake that people make when they're hiring an agent is they're not hiring the listing specialist.
Right. Yeah, that's important, because it's almost like going to, if I use an analogy, it's almost like going to a doctor that specializes in everything. At some point, something's got to give. You want a specialist that knows particular details of what you're trying to do. And I know it sounds very generic, but there are differences between a true listing agent and a true buyer's agent, right?
Absolutely.
Just the way you market the properties and what you do, and the strategies of showings and so on and so forth. And of course, the goal is different. The goal for a listing agent is to, if I remember right, generic textbook answer was to get the highest possible price in the shortest amount of time with the least amount of inconvenience.
That's absolutely true.
Where the buyer's agent there's one thing different out of that triad, which is to get the lowest possible price in the shortest amount of time with the least amount of inconvenience.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So when you're representing these sellers, you're obviously, you put the property on the market. You have different venues that you advertise the property, and of course you call your previous database to see if anyone is interested. And then of course it goes into the multiple listing service, and a lot of people don't understand what the multiple listing service really is. Can you explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. And it's funny because when I mentioned MLS, we talk about it so, like you said, so generically, but consumers don't really understand what we're saying. So it's good that you asked that question. So the multiple listing service is a tool that was developed by the Realtor Association, and it's a place where it's a database. It used to be a book. Now it used to be a big fat book.
Right.
Now it's
Yellow Pages years ago. Yep.
Now I did it. I sat in a office in Woonsocket when we were buying our first home, looking through the book. Nowadays people go on the internet. So where that data comes from, it comes from when an agent has a listing. We literally sit down at a computer and enter that listing into the database. So it's our data, our intellectual property that we are putting into a database. And so all the details about that particular property, and we have to do that with accuracy. Mm-hmm. We are actually governed by the MLS board to make sure that we are maintaining the integrity of that data. So for instance, when a house gets sold, accurately disclosing what it's sold for, right. What type of financing was used. And so there's all of those finite details about the property that are listed. And then what happens after that is no longer in our control. So what I mean by that is the data literally, the word is called aggregating, but we won't use that word. The data is taken from the MLS and it travels to the Realtor database. It travels to RILiving.com, and then after that is when it'll land on the consumer sites such as Zillow and Trulia, and there's hundreds of them. So if someone is putting in a search term for a house or location, neighborhood, style of home, all of that, the details of these listings will come up on the consumer websites, and it was all born in the MLS database.
Wow. Yeah, and I don't know who invented the concept of the multiple listing service, but it really is ingenious, because it basically, if if you put a property on the market and you submit it to the multiple listing service, you have over 5,000 agents in the state of Rhode Island who now have accessibility to your listing, where before the multiple listing service came around, if you gave your property to a real estate agent, all you had was them. You had the agent, you had whatever marketing they were going to do for you, and that was it. So it's really the difference between putting a property in a little tiny hometown newspaper or on eBay. Yeah, obviously you're going to get more traffic on eBay than you would a little, hometown website. And of course that, I would think, alone, because there's more, just like eBay, because there's more people viewing it, the propensity increases to have showings and more higher price if the house sells. The house is eventually going to sell for a little more money, correct?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah.
When I first I joined a company back in the early '80s, initially they were not MLS, and then they went MLS because the previous broker, he had been in business for many, many years. He really didn't need MLS, but it was a great tool, especially for me starting as a brand new agent. If I picked up a listing and I put it in the multiple listing service, now everyone can help me sell my property, and of course I make a commission, I make a living, and it makes my life a lot easier. But do you see the average marketing time in Northern Rhode Island? I know you have some listings right now in North Smithfield. Do you see what's your average marketing time approximately? It doesn't have to be exact.
Yeah. So when people ask me today how long it'll take for my house to sell, I tell them that it's going to take about 30 to 45 days. I happened to look up now don't forget, there was a time when houses were selling a lot quicker than that. So, 30 to 45 days, in comparison to selling your house in a week, it seems like to some sellers forever. Why is my house not sold? But they don't realize that this is a normal selling pattern. But I checked the data today, and, it's really, really interesting how consistent it is going back on a 5-year period, where the average days on market was 58 days in January of 2014. And you look up today, 5 years later, and the days on market is 42 days. During a period in 2015, it did creep up a little bit. I remember that. That's when interest rates had gone close to 5%. And once interest rates go to 5, it really does have an effect on the market. So 30 to 45 days is really what we're working with right now.
So when you say days on market is defined as the day the property goes on the market until the day someone signs a purchase and sales agreement to buy the property.
That
correct?
Is correct.
It's not like from the day it goes on the market to the closing date, because the buyer has to go get their mortgage, they have inspections, and so on and so forth. So realistically, it's probably a 2-month process at best, right?
Correct.
At very best, and more like 3.
It's more like 3.
Yeah.
Yes, from start to finish.
Yeah, and that's important for sellers to understand, because they're going on somewhere in their lives. They if they're moving, or like the example you had mentioned earlier, your folks are putting the property on the market now to have the whole transaction done by April. Right. So you have to plan on those days on market and holidays and peak sales periods during the year. Do you sell in the fall? Do you sell in the spring? And so on and so forth. Well, we've been talking to Elise Vetri today. Elise, again, is a broker in Northern Rhode Island. She has several listings. Actually, we're going to talk about some of your listings in a few minutes. But in the meantime, we're going to take another stab at a commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, you'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144.
And we are back. With Elise Vetri. Elise, we were just talking briefly during the commercial break about the types of properties in northern Rhode Island that particular buyers look for. What's the big draw in northern Rhode Island as compared to maybe somewhere else in the state?
I absolutely love talking about that topic. As an agent on the listing side, we're bringing buyers in from all other parts of the state and other parts of the country even, and we're introducing them to our area, and it's really interesting how diverse northern Rhode Island actually is. And when people start to think about it and they start to see what we have to offer, it really is exciting. So for instance, here in northern Rhode Island, we have a lot of beautiful lakes, and people are drawn to our lakefront communities from Connecticut even.
Wow.
I have right now I have 2 lakefront properties, and people that are buying them are local, so they're going to have a vacation home in their own state.
Isn't that great?
So it's meaning they have another home in Rhode Island, but that's where they're going to drive to on weekends. So, so lakefront homes are abundant in northern Rhode Island, and it makes for great buying opportunities for buyers to have both lifestyle, so they could be the year-round residents, in other words, they can have lifestyle as well along with that.
As compared to years ago where people had their house, during the winter months and a little cabin somewhere out on the lake.
Sure.
You go up to Spring Lake or some of these local Pasco Reservoir, and you see these little tiny one-bedroom houses from many years ago that people used to just come up and enjoy the summer.
Exactly.
Now they can live all year long.
They were cottages that didn't have heat, and now most of these homes have been upgraded to full year-round residences. So it's very exciting. It's very exciting selling these homes too. The other thing that we have up here that you don't really think about too often is all of our beautiful historical homes. So here in the North End, we have these wonderful homes, and it's a great story to tell people about the origin of those great properties. So here in northern Rhode Island, not only do we have a lot of geographically interesting properties, but we have a lot of architectural history here. So these old homes, I grew up in an old home, and I live in one.
Right.
So I love selling these old homes and helping people to understand their nuances. So, and then of course in Woonsocket, because of the Mills communities, we have a lot of multifamilies, and so that makes for another great opportunity for investors or for people who want to own or occupy in
Sure.
these properties. So again, we have a lot going on here.
Yeah, and I'm kind of an amateur historian, and when you go back in time and you look at what a powerful force Woonsocket was to this state, in the past with the mills and the manufacturing and so on and so forth. So all of those beautiful homes that are up on the North End, those big, I really shouldn't call them Victorians, because a lot of them were built after the Victorian era, then the more Edwardian era, that 1900, 1910 and area. They're absolutely gorgeous homes. Big, the big rub on those. Well, they don't have the closets, because I guess everybody years ago only had 2 suits to hang in the closet. But other than that, I mean, and if you could live with that, certainly.
Well, one of the things I talk about the most when I am showing those homes is that, with wealth came belonging. So, you have these humble homes where they may not have any closets, but in the North End, they have walk-in closets when you think about it, which is absolutely amazing. They had that much stuff to store.
For that time.
Correct.
Period.
This is a sign of the wealth of the period.
Yeah, and you can certainly buy one of those houses now without being a millionaire as you would have had to been 80 years ago.
Absolutely.
That's great. Well, when you market these properties, Elise, how important is it to price them? I mean, obviously, when someone wants to sell, you go in, you give them a price. And of course, there's thousands of websites out there that'll tell you what your house is worth. And I usually find, out of 1,000, 999 of them are wrong because they don't take into the variables that you would take into because you know the market. How does the pricing affect the marketing of one of your properties?
So, Paul, there's three basic tenets of real estate, and that's location, condition, and price. And no matter how complex this industry gets or how different times get, at the end of the day, that will never change. And so if you don't have your house priced properly, you can have the best location, you can have the best condition. It won't matter. The consumer will not recognize it as being properly priced, and they don't have any interest in taking their time to come see your house if they don't think that I say house, could be any property, if they don't think that you're serious. And speaking of websites, this is a perfect time to remind people that consumers are more educated than ever before because they do have access to all of this data.
Well, that's a good
and
point.
So I'm not talking about those value models. I'm just talking about the fact that they get to see these homes that are listed and they get to see the price that it's sold for. So they become students of the market. And at times they're more educated than we are because a buyer is going to be looking in a certain neighborhood. Okay, so they're on the internet. They're going to set up a search for a certain radius from their, like for instance, a certain distance from their work or an area where their family already resides. And so they're looking at the market through a microcosm. So I may be pricing properties through Rhode Island and Mass. They're actually looking at a very, very small segment of homes.
Okay.
So I think they're going to become more pros on it than we are.
Right.
And so if we don't price a home properly, it's really not going to sell. It's that simple.
So the old adage, something is worth what someone's willing to pay for it.
Absolutely.
That's the bottom line.
Absolutely.
If they're not willing to pay for it, then therefore if Target has something on the shelf at their store and it's not selling, Target has to slash the price and do what they have to do to move that product off the shelf.
And I think that, homeowners understand that better. There was a time when they really wanted to add in a large, price at $20,000, $30,000 over, so that would be the negotiating room, the negotiating window. And so when I talk to consumers today, they have a better understanding of that, and they appreciate an agent that's going to come in and help them to understand what their house is worth, what it's going to sell for, that is, and how to properly price that. And they look to me for that. Now, that does not mean you're giving the house away. It only means that you're using a strategy around listing your property so that it will sell. When a house is properly priced, it will sell in the quickest amount of time. And so, and equivalent to that is it will sell at the highest price.
And your job as a listing agent is to position, the old 4 Ps of marketing: price, product, presentation, and positioning. Your job is to position that property against other properties that are similar, and sometimes they're not exactly similar, but there's pluses and minuses that you take into consideration to basically help the competition sell your product through
Absolutely.
the multiple listing service.
That's
right?
correct.
So you're giving a buyer the choices of the properties that are out there that are similar, but you're positioning it and pricing it so the owner or you're representing's property stands out more than the rest. Correct?
That's correct.
And hopefully, and many properties sell for full price that way, right?
They absolutely do.
There's this misnomer that you have to go in and make a 5 or 10% less offer, and of course buyers try it, but if the property is priced right, they sell for full price, right?
Absolutely.
Wow,
Yes.
that's great.
Yes.
Now, I noticed a couple of your listings, and I wanted to just talk a little bit for a few minutes about some of your current listings because I thought they were really interesting. I was looking at this one on Snake Hill Road in Gloucester, and it's a ranch house, and I'm becoming a ranch enthusiast as I get older because I want to get away from the stairs. And this looks like a sprawling house over at 1504 Snake Hill Road, 2,200 square foot ranch. That's huge.
It is. Wow. It was a contractor that built that house for his family, and he he just built an oversized brick ranch. So he wasn't, I'm sure at the time, and when that house was built in the 70s, I believe, that the focus wasn't on the one level living per se. He had a certain style of home that he was interested in, with the brick facing, but today, one-level ranches are so much in demand. Now that house has a finished basement with set up for an in-law type of a thing. And so what we're finding today is that a large segment of the population, if I had to put a number to it, I'd say about 20 to 25% of the buyers are out there are looking for some type of communal living situation. So that house, being as large as it is, with the very spacious finished basement, the kitchen down there, is definitely going to gravitate.
Sure.
That type of buyer will gravitate to it.
And you got some privacy, because I noticed you're on 2 acres. What if anyone looking for that type of environment? It's $389.9. And I just did some rough numbers. With 5% down, that's a $1,700 a month mortgage payment. Under the current rates, apartments right now, $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 a month to rent. For another couple of $100 more, you can have this beautiful home. And of course, that doesn't take into consideration the tax benefits that you get from owning. So all the interest that you pay is tax deductible, and the property taxes are tax deductible. So that's $1,700 probably after taxes is probably close to $1,300 or $1,400.
Absolutely,
right?
Yes, correct.
That's a deal. You see, you have Graniteville Road in Burrillville.
Yes, so that's a condominium complex, and so that is a unique situation. They were looking for an investor to buy that property because there's plans that are already approved. The building official said just go ahead and build it. We have one set of 4 condominiums, so it's one building, and there's approvals for 2 more. Wow. So we're looking for an investor that's willing to take on that project, but it's a sweet situation because all the permits are already in place, all of the infrastructure is already there. We just need someone to go in there and just build the other 2 buildings and call it a day.
And that's $269.9.
Yes,
that falls right into that price range you were talking about at the beginning of the show, where that's the hot price range.
That's right. And those 4 condos that are currently there, they were listed today, they'd sell somewhere around $280.
Wow.
So it's a really good deal.
Yeah, and again, I did the numbers on this one at 5% down. $1,187 a month is the mortgage payment. So after taxes, that's probably close to $900 a month. And where can you really live now and get that kind of space for $900 a month? It's almost impossible.
Yeah.
Well, we have about 10 minutes to go. We're going to go to another quick commercial, and we'll be right back.
Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, you'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144.
Okay, we are back to Real Estate Pro Talk with Elise Vetri. Elise has talked about a couple of her listings. that she has in the Northern Rhode Island market right now. But I got to be honest with you, Elise. I don't want to tell my wife about this Snake Hill Road property because I wasn't in the mood to buy a house, another house. But I'll tell you what, I think if she heard about it, she'd be pulling me over there. What's involved, Elise? You've done this a while. You work hard. You built a successful business. What's involved after the sales agreement is signed to bring the house to successful closure?
So it's really, even though real estate can be very, very complex and there's a lot of moving parts involved with getting a house to a sale, the bottom line is that, the way that the Rhode Island purchase and sale has been constructed, it really does set the expectations for both the buyer and seller in terms of what their responsibilities are, what their performance periods are. What I mean by that is when they have to have their inspections done, when they have to have their mortgage approval by, and don't mistake me, they come to the table pre-approved, but a mortgage commitment is issued subject to that particular property, the appraisal coming in at value and such. So that whole process, takes, like we were saying earlier, you have to involve the lender. The lender has his or her role, and that's going to take a certain amount of time too to bring that loan to the close. So, the timeline is 30 to 45 days should be the expectation of what it's going to take to bring the property to a closing. But it's really all the responsibilities for both buyer and seller are laid out there right in the purchase and sale agreement.
So in the meantime, you're doing a lot of work. Actually, selling the house might even be just the easy part.
Sometimes it is.
You have if the house is out in the country, if it's in North Smithfield or Burrillville, certain parts of Cumberland, you have septic inspections that have to be done, right?
Yes.
And then we have radon inspections that have to be done. You mentioned the appraisal. People are having lead inspections done now. So all of these things that in the progression of events from sales agreement to closing all have to be done within a certain window, right?
That is correct.
And what's the window on that? Once you sign a sales agreement, how quickly does all of this stuff have to get done?
So there's been a recent change in the way that the contracts were written, and they are written by the state. We don't write contracts. Every property in Rhode Island uses the same contract, and that performance period for the inspections is 10 business days. So, I'm sorry, 10... I always get that messed up. Yeah. So in that window, that is when the inspections do need to be done. And there's a reason why, because, the buyer may, God forbid, but they oftentimes ask for certain repairs to be done. So that's when this buyer and the seller will negotiate what makes sense. Okay. And but then when that period is over, the inspection window is closed. And so no seller or agent wants to be talking about inspections or inspection requests after that window is closed. So it does put an end to any kind of request that could be made of the seller and any kind of negotiations that happen as a result.
So in other words, it's kind of seals the deal, as we used to say in my old neighborhood. There's no negotiations after that point. And of course, every house has something. I mean, I find even new construction, if a buyer has an inspection, something will turn up. And basically, the seller basically has three choices, right? They can say, no, I'm not doing anything that the buyer has requested, or they can say, yes, I'm going to do everything that the buyer has requested, or they can come back and say, well, I'll do this, but you do that kind of thing, correct?
Absolutely. And in the context that I'd like to deliver that to a would-be seller is that I don't want them to be alarmed. Okay, so the way that portion of the inspection contingency is written is that it's there to protect the seller, because let's say there's let's say the roof needs to have a major repair and it's going to cost a significant amount of money. Nobody can force that seller to make that repair. No one is going to force a hardship. In other words, the legal process does not force a hardship onto the seller. So they really do need to understand that anything that big that comes up like that, no one is going to force the seller's hand to spend that kind of money.
That's a very important point to make, because I know I have sellers I have one right now that thought he had to do everything on the home inspection report, and I told him, no, I said, we don't have to do anything if you don't want to. I mean, it may put the sale in jeopardy. However, technically, contractually, you don't really have to do all of these things that the inspector came up with. I mean, there's reasonable things that a buyer, a latent defect is something that's hidden. There's reasonable things that a buyer may find, termites or, some mold or whatever, and I think that's reasonable for a buyer to ask. But ripped shades and leaky faucets, and a hose faucet in the yard needs a washer or something that are really minor. I mean, I don't think those are deal breakers, right?
Absolutely not. Nobody wants to see a sale fall apart over those minor repairs.
All right, we have a couple of minutes left. So Elise, tell me where you think the market's going. I mean, where you're out there every day, you're hitting the market hard. Where do you see it going? Do you see this continuing on?
It's a very, very interesting question, and it's an interesting thing to think about. After an 8-year run-up in pricing, one would imagine, especially since real estate is cyclical, and we've seen these cycles before, where, after 5 years, that's when things start to level out. But we're in a very, very interesting time, and we still have rates have gone up a little bit, but they're hovering right around 4%. That's historically very low.
How do you beat that?
We have a very strong jobs market. Northern Rhode Island in and of itself, I think, is going to continue to continue to stay in a seller's market. That's my prediction. But I think, once again, buyers are going to benefit because of these low rates. And as long as we continue to talk about low inventory, that's going to be the key word. It's going to take a lot of new construction, new inventory, new supply to come on to fill this vast hole that we have. There simply is not enough housing to meet the demand, and I think that's something we're going to be talking about for some time to come.
So you sound really optimistic about the current condition.
I absolutely am.
Wow.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, will we see double? No, there was a time when in this market recovery, the prices were growing close to 7% per year. I don't know that we're going to continue to see that, but I don't see prices going in the other direction either.
Really? Now, let's give the audience your contact information, because we've talked today, but unless they meet you face to face and hire you, it's really not going to do any good. Why don't you give the listening audience your contact information?
I'd be happy to. I'm available anytime to talk on my cell. My cell phone, which is 401-651-1138. You can call or text, and you can email me at Elise Vetri at kw.com, and it's spelled ELISEVETRI at kw.com. And I welcome any questions that anyone has. I really just want to be here to be the voice and to be the educator.
Oh, that's great. And, you provide, if someone calls, even if they just want a market analysis to find out the value of their home, even if if they're thinking of selling now or in the short-term future, you'll do that, correct?
Absolutely. I actually don't think the process can start too soon. If anyone is thinking about selling, even if it's a year from now, I welcome the opportunity to be called in so I can offer up any kind of advice. I don't like to see homeowners make repairs that are unnecessary to attract that buyer when they do list it. So I would like to be called in early enough so I can give them the right advice.
Excellent. Well, you've been listening to Elise Vetri, and this is Real Estate Pro Talk. We wish you, both of us wish you a happy holiday weekend, and enjoy, and we'll be here next Friday from 3 to 4 p.m. Thanks for listening.